Hey, what's up? Welcome to Honest Q&As, where I answer questions that a lot of entrepreneurs are just too embarrassed to ask. And today we are going to cover sales calls. For context, I am Ray Green. I'm a former executive turned nomad entrepreneur, and I now have my own consulting business where we do focus a lot on sales. Prior to that, I was an operator for private equity and worked with sales turnarounds. And before that, a sales manager for about 10 years. And prior to that, quota carrying salesperson. So have some experience in sales. And what I've got here are a handful of questions that have been sent to me, and I'm just going to rip through these and answer them as best and honest as I can. All right, the first question that I've got is, how should I prepare for a sales call? The way that you should prepare for a sales call is based on the volume of activity that you have to do as a salesperson and the size of the sale, basically. So like that's how it's basically correlated, because there's a lot of preparation that's going to go into asking somebody for $1 million. You're going to spend a lot of time diving in and making sure that you've got all the context and everything that you need in that sale. If you are making 100 calls a day, that's the last thing that you want to do, right? And a lot of times what happens is we use preparation and research and things like that in sales processes as an excuse to just like not make the next call, right? Like call reluctance or doing the activity that we need to do on the other end of the continuum that, are going out, doing enterprise deals, asking for 7 figures and not doing the appropriate amount of research. And then they look like assholes when they show up to these meetings and are asking questions that they could have found out really easily before they got there. So the amount of preparation that you need to do is largely based on where you are in the sales process and where you are in the sales cycle, the amount of activity that you have to do as a salesperson and the size of the sale. When I was at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I started at the chamber selling small business membership and doing political fundraising with small businesses. And most of those sales were in the range of $150 to $1,000 or $1,500. And the volume that we were doing was 50, 60 calls a day. And that level of research, we'd check out a LinkedIn profile, we'd Google the company, we'd scan the website, and then we'd make the call. Right? You're asking for $150, $500, $1,000. You don't want to spend hours and hours doing due diligence on that call, especially when the chances are high probability that you're going to get a gatekeeper and have to work through that and do some follow-up. So we can do a few minutes of research on that. Also at the chamber, I worked with mid-market companies where we were going in and we were doing $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 sales. And for that, I'm hopping on a plane and I'm flying out to sit down in front of a company. Like you can bet your ass I'm going to do some research, right? I'm going to do the due diligence and I'm going to find press releases. I'm going to find out who else is in the company. I'm going to see if I know anybody that knows anybody. I'm going to find every angle that I can in that sale, given the appropriate amount of time for that. I also did the job of flying around to meet with Fortune 1000 CEOs, like large national account level sales. And there you're asking for 6 and 7 figures. You're going to invest a lot more time into research on that, right? Like you're going to look at who the board is. You're going to look at who all the connectors are. You're going to treat that like an enterprise level deal. And it is so important that you've got the confidence when you go into that. Otherwise, you can't project confidence to them, right? You can't project confidence that you don't have. And it starts with basics, fundamentals. Prepare for your sales call. All right, the second question is, what questions should I ask at the start of a sales call? That is a good question. To start a sales call, first of all, the first thing you want to do is you want to take control of the sales call and make sure that you have the space to ask the questions that you need to ask and run your sales process appropriately. So at the very start of the sales call, you don't actually go in and start machine gunning questions like in discovery. Like what you actually do is you go in and you set the stage. You set yourself up. You say, hey, glad to meet you. Skip most of the chummy, like weather, football talk. Like that's not the kind of rapport that you really want to build if you're selling like in a consultative sales environment at all. This is the process that I'm going to run, right? Like I've got us down for this amount of time. Typically I run through a handful of questions that are going to help me understand where we're at and if we can help. And if we can help, cool, we can talk about that. If not, I'll be the first to tell you and give you some time back in your day. Is that cool, right? Is that okay with you? Does that work for you? And the next thing that I'm going to do before I start asking a bunch of discovery questions is you say, hey, Joe, what led you to reach out today? Was there anything about my content or my messaging or a particular video or topic or anything that stood out to you? What you're doing is twofold. You're getting them to acknowledge, hey, I called you, all right? Second thing is, when they tell you what it is that stood out about your background, about your content, about some messaging, about a lead magnet, whatever it was, then they are not only just telling you what the problem and the pain point was, they're actually helping you establish rapport in their own words. The types of questions that you're going to ask in your discovery basically come down to 2 things. Find out what problems they have, and you're going to find out what pains those problems are causing. In other words, why are those problems problems? Now, here's how I differentiate these 2 things. Problems are facts. Okay? Pains are emotions. Most of the time, most discovery calls that I listen to when I'm listening as a sales manager, as a sales consultant, I hear a lot of questions around the problems, and that's good, right? Like we want to understand the problems, the facts. What are the facts? My sales are down. My HR lead isn't working. My leads aren't coming in. My, financials aren't working. My whatever that is. But you don't want to stop there. You actually want to go one level deeper, and you want to identify the pain that's associated with that problem. It's not just that sales are low. It's that sales are so low that they're afraid they're not going to make payroll. It's that they're not taking home enough money. It's that they're afraid they're going to lose their damn house. It's like all of the other things that are associated with the problem that you need to understand when you get to the closing phase. So no matter what you're selling, like this is for if you're selling IT services, if you're selling financial services, even if you were selling life coaching, like all of the above, there's a pain that's associated with that problem. And that's what you want to get to when you're asking discovery questions at a sales call. Third question is, what do you do when someone comes up with an objection that you don't know how to respond to? When I don't know, then I just get genuinely curious. I start asking questions. Like, don't bullshit your way through it. Don't pretend that you know something that you don't. That will ruin your credibility and tarnish your brand faster than anything. If you have an objection that you don't know how to necessarily respond to, one of the first things you want to do is respond with a question. Tell me more about that. Or sometimes you can just repeat back what they just said and raise your voice at the end. Use tonality to turn it into a question. Oh, that's expensive, right? Like you turn it back into a question, and then you let the space sit in for just a second, and they'll start elaborating on it for you. If they get an objection that you don't know how to respond to, figure out how to respond to it by having questions in return. By the way, the person asking questions is the person in control of a sales call anyway. All right, fourth question here is, isn't it awkward when people don't want to buy? I know that I've done a really good job of demonstrating that my product or service is going to help make their life better. Even though I've articulated that, and even though I've hit on pain points, and even though I've tied it back to their specific problem and the value that can be created and the future state that they can go to. If I've done all of those things really well and they still don't want to buy, that's the only time that it feels awkward to me. Any other time, I look at it and I say, all roads lead to discovery. All roads come back to the discovery call, whether you do a discovery and a demo in one call or you have 5 sales calls in your process. All roads lead back to discovery. And so when someone doesn't want to buy, one of two things: you aren't going to help them get the transformation or the results that they are looking for. And in that case, you don't want them to buy. Like if you can't help them get the results that they're looking for, the worst thing that could happen is they give you money, because they give you the money, then they have the expectations, then you have the time that you've invested not helping them get results. You've wasted your time, they've wasted their money, and you've created a negative person, like naysayer, out there in the market for you. That's no bueno. The other scenario is we have not found what the real pain or the real problem or the real desired future state is in the discovery process, right? Like there is something that we missed, that when we were going through our questions and we were identifying the problems, we were identifying the pains, we're identifying where they're at now and where they want to go and what the gap is in between. Like we follow all those things, and they still don't want to buy at the end, and we're confident that we can help them get results. You go, I missed it. Like I missed something in here. And one of the best things that you can do in that scenario is actually just say that. When this tends to happen, it's usually because I've missed something here, because I truly, genuinely believe, I know we can get you results, right? Based on everything that you've told me here. And if you don't want to move forward, it's on me, frankly. Like I have missed something. Can we rewind and just clarify a few things? And if you take that approach or you have that mindset about it, you can flip that around. All right, next question here is, what should I do when they say they need to think about it? The single most common objection that you are gonna get if you are selling anything of value, any high ticket service, mid ticket service, the number one objection is gonna be, I need to think about it. Here's the thing. Buyers go to an excuse drawer, and they just reach into that drawer and they grab the one that works the most. I need to think about it. If you have a rebuttal or you address that one, then what they do is they reach back in and okay, I need the second one here. Like, got to talk to a spouse, right? Like, so there's an excuse drawer of common objections, and you just got to accept you're going to hear them all the time. And the best thing you can do is just be fully prepared when those happen to address it, like head on. I want to identify what the thinking criteria that they are going to use to make a decision. right? Okay, cool. Hey, I totally understand. When people are buying our services, it's really not uncommon to want to think about that. So it makes complete sense. If I may ask, as you're thinking that through, what are the most important pieces of what we've talked about today that are going to influence your decision, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what I'm trying to do is I want to understand the buying criteria. I want to understand the thought process that they are going to use, but also what I'm doing is I'm trying to call out the fact that it's not really a think it over deal, right? Like they're going to, oh, well, what's below the surface, right? Like peel the onion back. Then they're going to start telling me what the real underlying objections are, because very rarely does somebody need to just think about it, right? Like they're not going to get any more information when they get off the call with you, right? And the person with the information that they need to think about it, like what if they go think about it and they have a few more questions? Like the person that can answer it is you. The second thing that you want to do is you want to help assess, like you want to figure out where you're at, right? Like the worst part about the think it over excuse to me, if I say, okay, cool, well, let's follow up Friday at 2, I'm really thinking, God, what are they going to be thinking about? Like it's the unknown. I know that there's something below the surface. I know that there's more to it and that they're not telling me. And I'm just letting them go. And I don't know that. Like it's really ambiguous, right? So what I want to do is I want to get clarity as a salesperson on where we stand. If I may ask, like, shoot me straight, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we right now? Like, where would you say you are right now, with 1 being never going to buy in a million years and 10 being ready to sign up right now? Like, where would you say you're at? What you're trying to do is force the conversation to get on it. Like you're trying to force a candid conversation about where you really stand. You know you're not at a 10, right? If you were at a 10, they'd be buying your shit right now. You know you're not at a 1 necessarily, because they probably wouldn't be wasting their time with you at this point, right? So you're somewhere in between. Are you a 2 to a 3, or are you a 7 to an 8, right? So you ask that question, and then when they tell you, well, you know, I mean, you're more expensive than the competitors. I'd say I'm a 6. Cool, I get that. What would it take to get you to a 10? What do you feel is missing? You wait for them to help you understand what the delta is. Like they're at a 6, you want them to be at a 10. What's the difference? Is it price? Is it they're afraid that they're not going to get results? Is it that they need to see more testimonials? Is it, like, what is it that's really driving that? And then you can start to have that conversation live. Oftentimes, statistically, like it's not going to come back if you let them go anyway. All right, next one here is, what is a good close rate? 100%. I mean, that's a good close rate. Like you want to close everyone that you have. Here's the thing. This is like one of those, it depends answers, but it largely depends on what is driving traffic to your funnel. What is driving the leads, the prospects that you have on your sales call to that sales call. And what I mean is, if you're using paid ads, for example, and you're driving cold traffic to your funnel, and there's a very quick turnaround, like you get a lead magnet and then you're asking them to book a call instantly, you're going to have a lower close rate, 30%, call it, which is not uncommon in that kind of model, right? Like 30, 40%. If you are using organic content and it's just people that have been immersed in your content for weeks or months or even years sometimes, and it's organic bookings that are coming in, then you're going to have a much higher close rate because the intent level is a lot higher. Right? Like it's just different. If I have followed you for 6 months and I've seen your content every other day or 3 or 4 times a week, and I know your message, I know who you are, I know your brand, I know your offer, and I'm still getting on a call with you, my intent level is just going to be higher. But the really important thing, if you are driving traffic from different places, is recognizing that you've got to treat each one differently, right? Like the way that you're going to go about a sales call to somebody that just saw an ad, 4 minutes ago got a lead magnet, and then immediately booked a call is going to be different than the process I'm going to run with somebody who's gone through my content for a year. There is no single good close rate. Like the good close rate is usually the best in a bunch, right? Like if you've got a sales team and the average is something like 38%, you've got a top performer that's doing 54%, like that's the good close rate in your model. But like I said, a lot of your close rate has to do with how you're marketing and how those two things are connected, your sales and your marketing. How do I get better at sales? Here's something that most people don't know. I couldn't stand sales when I got into sales. In fact, when I started in real sales, like my first real sales job was like selling knockoff perfume and cologne in California parking lots. My first real professional sales job, I actually only took because I wanted to be in politics, right? So I interviewed at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it's a large advocacy group. And I said, I want to work there. And I think I want to go into politics. I want to be a lobbyist. Like, that's the angle that I'm going to go. The only job they had in Dallas at the time was a sales job. And I said, I'll plug my nose and I'll do this stupid sales thing. A lot of people think sales is like you have to have natural charisma. You just have to be naturally good at it. And I've managed a lot of people like that over the years, and God bless them. Like, they can go in, they can sell anything, right? Like, they are a mercenary, and they're good at it, and they've just got like a natural ability to sell people. That was never me. That was not me at all. I was an introvert. I didn't want to do sales, and I said, okay, like, fine, I'll figure this thing out. And what I did to get good at sales was I found out what the top people were doing. Right? Like, I went around in cubicles, and I sat with Charles, the number one guy. I sat next to him. I said, okay. And at one point I said, can I just have that script? And I just went back to my cube and I just did what he did. And the first month out of the gates, I was number 2. Okay. So that's one thing, is find good people that are getting great results and just emulate what they're doing, right? Like, imitate before you iterate. Find a good best practice, execute it, get good at it. If you want to get good at sales, what you need to do is get on as many sales calls as humanly possible. Like, it is really a game where if you put in volume and then you've got a feedback loop, right? Like, in each call, you go back and listen to it. Like, listen to your own sales calls, as uncomfortable as it is. Take that sales call, review it, right? Get some feedback on it. Go do it again. And just like a golf swing, like, make little tweaks, and those tweaks compound into a really great process. You don't get there if you don't have some volume that's associated with it, and you're not forcing the feedback loop. The other thing that you can do is just listen to a wide audience of people in sales. Be careful though, because there's a lot of, in fact, like, I coach a few groups with small business owners, and occasionally I'll share a YouTube video of a sales influencer, and I'll let them listen to it. And I'll be like, shitty advice, like, absolutely shitty advice. We listened to one recently where the guy says, like, well, if you're talking to a gatekeeper, just give the gatekeeper the pitch. And I'm like, terrible advice. You never pitch the gatekeeper. So be careful. Like, not everybody that's on YouTube or a sales influencer is going to be super helpful, but there are a ton of great resources and great people out there that truly do know their shit. And it is like a university on YouTube. I mean, you could subscribe to my channel too. I talk a lot about sales too. I hope this has been really helpful. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if it has, for more tips on growing your business and selling better. Again, I'm Ray Green. Adios.